OTB AM. With Gillette, in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent modes.
2 minutes to 9 on this Tuesday morning on OTB AM, and delighted to say Alan Quinlan is on the line with myself and Johnny. Morning, Quinny.
Morning, lads. How are you?
Keeping well. We might, before we get to looking ahead to the first game of the Autumn International Series this Saturday against the South Africans, we might put an underlining mark on the URC action at the weekend. And Munster, we referenced them earlier, myself and Johnny, but look, a 1-point defeat. I guess you have to consider the fact that there was up to 20 players out injured for Munster. So the Ulster game, although it's a loss, comes with an asterisk maybe in some regards.
Yeah, it is. It does. I think obviously, I said last week it was a must-win for Munster. That was pretty self-explanatory. They've now lost 5 out of 7 games, which is a terrible start. And I think, look, there's positives probably against Ulster, the Leinster game. Obviously, the Bulls game was a really good win for them, but the other performances were really poor. Dragons, Connacht, in particular, even the second half against Zebra. So they've started really slow, and they've put themselves in a really tough position. I think the players away, you've mentioned it. I think they've struggled to cope without them, and they've just had a lot of bad luck, even after the Leinster game. John Klein, Thomas Ahern, two of their starting second rows that day, both gone. So they were kind of down to the bare bones, really. And they're coming up against an Ulster side who are in a good position, full of confidence. I suppose they had illness in South Africa the week before, which would have not helped their situation. But I mean, from a playing point of view, they've been playing very well this year. They had a brilliant win the week before in South Africa, and they got there in the end. I think Ulster were pretty dominant in the first half. The 2 maul tries, I think, and the other James Hume one came off a maul as well when they got close to the line. So a lot of problems for Munster at the moment, but there is some positives as regards the young players getting exposed, the way they're playing, the way they're trying to play. I think they're second in the most offloads in the URC, which is I think for Graham Rowntree, that isn't something that will please him and say, God, we're it's a table. They're 14th in the league table, and that's where they sit at the moment. And between one thing and another, I think they've had their issues around, adapting the new coaches, getting up to speed, but they've been very hampered by the emerging Ireland international call-ups and a number of injuries, and it's been a dreadful start for them, really.
I was asking about the crowd last week, Quinny. I thought it was striking how much they were behind them in the second half. And is it a sense that you mentioned the offloads and they're playing some nice rugby as well? So is it a case of they know that they're trying to buy into a transition here?
Yeah, well, in very simple terms, Johnny, the Munster of old would be slowing the game down, trying to box kick the ball. People realise where they're at. If all the players, like I mentioned, Klein and Thomas Ahern, if both those second rows are available, I'm not saying Ulster won't score from them all with the 2 tries they did, but they're in a much stronger position of stopping it. So look, I think the crowd realised that there's going to be a bit of pain here, and I think they can stay with him. And I've always said this: if there's a bit of fight. And maybe it's a bit condescending and a bit, it's obviously disappointing that that's where we're at now. And, I spoke about maybe the problems in previous years and the previous regime and where this has all come to. But look, all the kind of dirty laundry is out now, and I think they need to get better in the fitness department, the medical department, lots of areas, the way they train, the type of profile of players that they're bringing through. And advance that all those things in a better place. And Munster are a big brand, but they're not winning matches and they're not winning trophies. So I think the supporters were very, very vocal and got behind them at the weekend, and they will do. I think rugby people understand that in Munster, that it's a reality now. Munster are well off the pace, but the positives are the way they're trying to play and the younger players that are coming through. I think that's what people want. They want to see that fight. And it is a period now that, you can either get behind the team or not. it's hard to be critical of what Munster did the other night. I know you can go through the game and you can see mistakes and knock-ons and certain things, but I think there is positive signs into what they're trying to do, and even for the try they scored in the second half, Shea Daly's try, I think a real positive moment. Jack Crowley gets the conversion, they're ahead incredibly, but Ulster would have had penalties down at the other end to win the game. But I think to fight back from the position they were in was positive, and they're in a tough position. And I think the worry now, and everybody's saying it to me, is European rugby next year. They may be in the Challenge Cup.
Just for anyone who slept or partied, I guess, through the weekend, the results involving Irish provinces. Friday night, Scarlets 5, Leinster 35. The game we're speaking about, Munster 14, Ulster 15 on Saturday, and then Ospreys 19, Connacht 22 was also a result from Saturday. Like you mentioned, the second row issues there, Quinny. Like when you look at the lineup at the weekend, it's probably the 7th and 8th choices for second row. You mentioned John Klein, you mentioned Thomas Ahern, you also have Tyke Byrne, Sneeman, Finian Wycherley, Paddy Kelly unavailable. And when you look then at the dominance Ulster had at the line out, perhaps it's no surprise.
No, it's not, and that's why I think people, there was kind of a worry and a fear, and it was the same going into the Leinster game. I think somebody said to me recently, when the day Munster kind of get a bit of luck with getting everybody out in the fields, I think that will be exciting to see if they can get a few games with their full strength side, their internationals back. Maybe we'll see it after November, and we will see it hopefully. Obviously you'll see more players back for the European run in December. But with the injuries, I think, look at Snyman, what's happened. You're probably not going to see him till post-Christmas now. But it is what it is. They just have to get on with it, and that's it. It's sometimes when you're kind of down, the last thing you need is another injury, and that's what's happened to them. But it's you're kind of shaking out who's available to you and who's coming through. And I think the big positive in the second row, an academy graduate, he's still in the academy. He's only 19, Edwin Adogbo. It's phenomenal, the experience he's getting. And Saturday night again, he showed how good he can be and where he can go. Evan O'Connell was on the bench, Paul O'Connell's nephew. He didn't get on, but he's only 18. Ruan Quinn came on against Leinster, made his debut against a few weeks previously. He's only 19 now. So a lot of really good players coming through, but I think there's certain areas they need more. They need some centres, they need, front row cover. Look, there's some positives, and I think if they get everyone back. But the season is kind of running away from, when you 5 losses in the first 7, it's very difficult. Look at Connacht's situation. They've turned it right around. I think their performance at the weekend against the Ospreys, a lot of mistakes, a lot of errors, I think inaccuracies, but that cohesion and that kind of togetherness that you want to win away games is starting to come. I think they had a brilliant performance against the Scarlets. They blew them away the week before in Galway. And then to go to the Ospreys and get the win. A win they should be getting. The Ospreys are missing their Welsh players. Connacht are not as badly hit for obvious reasons. They don't have as many guys gone. A little bit of cohesion there. But they've strung together a few results, and the picture is totally different than it was with them losing their first 3 games. So Munster have to find a little run like that somewhere along the way, but it's just going to get harder and harder, and they can hope to get players back. But Connacht are in a better position now, and that'll be on the 26th of November. It's a good few weeks away. We've got the internationals first, but Connacht and Munster will be a humdinger down in Thomond Park.
Ulster deserve credit as well, don't they? Like that TMO in the first half would have possibly put them out of sight, and it was kind of a small handle error from the scrum after. But like the context of they didn't have a great prep at all going into this match in terms of the players that were out, and as you mentioned, and still managed to find a way.
Yeah, and they have a number of players with Ireland as well, so it isn't just Munster who were affected. I think it's the injuries on top of the internationals away. That's the problem for Munster. Ulster have injuries as well, and guys away with Ireland. But you know yourself, Johnny, in sport, confidence that it'll, you often think that bounce of the ball, that bit of luck, we call it, you kind of create that. And it comes with a togetherness and a feel-good factor, work rate, all that kind of stuff. And Ulster, have played a lot of good, brilliant rugby this year. They're very, very dangerous. I think a lot of kind of seasoned players that they had available to them the weekend. Rory Sutherland coming off the bench. He's a British and Irish Lion. He's a great signing for them. They picked him up from Worcester. Vermeulen was very powerful. Sam Carter, Alan O'Connor in the second row. Jordy Murphy, a couple of big moments with a try and a turnover as well. Someone who'll try and claw his way back into the international setup. He's had a tough couple of years. So Nathan Doak, obviously the couple of kicks, the conversions, Ulster could have been further ahead. But you sense at the end of the game from Dan McFarlane that, delighted with the results. The first time in 8 years they've won in Thomond Park, but frustrated. And I can understand his frustration with, they didn't play for, show any sort of ambition in Thomond Park in the second half of that game. And they did the same last year when they lost, when the game Zebo got sent off in last year. So happy to get out of there, but frustrated. But they deserve credit because, you have to get wins and pick up wins on the road. And that's a hard thing to do.
You mentioned some of the positive shoots for Munster and Edwin Odogbo being one of them, and maybe he wouldn't have got so much game time under different management. Jack Crowley is another one, Quinny, that I wanted to touch on as well, because I guess before the Emerging Ireland tour a lot of the talk was on Kieran Frawley, picks up the injury, and then Crowley takes the opportunity on the Emerging Ireland tour with both hands. And Graham Rowntree spoke about him very warmly after the match, talking about him as a leader. He said, look at Jack Crowley, at the end of the game he's still navigating us around the field. You nearly forget, looking at him, Quinny, that he's only 22, but there are leadership qualities there with him for sure.
Yeah, very, very much so. And I think that's another big positive for Munster in a situation where it's hard to kind of find those positives and really focus on them. But he's a positive for Irish rugby. I think there's obviously been so much talk for years about who's going to be the successor, who's going to close that gap in Johnny Sexton and Joey Carberry, and Kieran Frawley now and Jack Crowley are two that are kind of pushing themselves up the ranks. And Crowley has a big future ahead of him. I think he was brilliant for Ireland when he played in the under-20s, and the success he had and the confidence, I think, probably stifled a little bit in the last year or two. I think Munster probably focused a bit more on Ben Healy because of his kicking game and the type of game that Johan van Graan was trying to play. But, he's a very athletic player, Jack Crowley, and he's a physical player as well. So, we've got to see more of him. He needs to get more game time, and but it's a very exciting opportunity for him. And I think, he may be involved and probably will be involved in the A game on Friday night against the New Zealand selection. So all that's good stuff for him. And when he's involved in an Irish squad, he's up there this week training with them, seeing how Sexton does it, how the other players do it, how Robbie Henshaw, Gary Ringwald, these guys, go about their training week. So he'll be learning all the time from that.
You mentioned Munster's position and looking ahead, I guess they really desperately want to get those URC playoff spots and get to the Champions Cup. 12th at the minute, but having said that, they're only 5 points behind Cardiff, who are 6th. But then I mentioned the run of fixtures coming up earlier in the show, 11 games remaining. Like, they still have to play Leinster again, they have to go to Belfast, double header in South Africa. That's 4 difficult games. The remainder of the games nowhere near as difficult, you'd have to say, but it's going to be touch and go, Quinny, isn't it, whether they can get that the playoff spot? Yeah,
very much so. Like, you lose, I think they lost 7 in total last year, and they barely got into the playoffs. Then they lost that quarter final against Ulster. So there's very little wriggle room left. And I think you have to, the next game is Connacht, then they've got Edinburgh away the 2nd of December, and then you've got European games, and then Leinster in Thomond Park. They haven't won against them in the league. The last time was 2018, so it's 4 years ago. But
you imagine the Connacht game be huge in the sense, Quinny, like they're going in against a confident team,
but it's used for Connacht as well, Johnny. Connacht are not going to go down to Thomond Park. They're going to be in it's after the November internationals. I don't think Munster will have the internationals available. Bundy Aki will probably be available because he'll only be back available the previous week. He'll have very little rugby played, so he'll be playing. It'll be very difficult for Munster. It'll be a very strong Connacht side that'll go down there. It just depends who's back. You know, Thomas Ahern is out for a long time now. Sean Klein, will he be back? Will they have Anton Frisch, Conway, Keith Earls, these guys back? Who knows? But then they've got Leinster Christmas, and then away to Ulster, and then they've got the Lions at home, and then they have a run of a couple of games when they head into the Six Nations where they've home games, and they've games that you think they'll win. But it's the last two. It's the Stormers and the Lions. Stormers and the Sharks away, I think, in South Africa. The last two games, I think they've got to try and get right up that table before they head to South Africa. And then you're saying, well, if we pick up one of those games in those 2 weeks, have all our internationals available, maybe an opportunity to one of those games to get you into a playoff spot. But look, it's a long way away. I think if they've got to focus on the here and now, and it's probably too far away looking at that. But I think the games they'll look back on, and I said this from the start, they could have won that game in Cardiff at the start. Probably Cardiff deserved that win, but it was there for the taking. They made a lot of mistakes. The Dragons, you know, the Connacht game, they're ones they look back at with real frustration. Not necessarily, you know, with being disrespectful to those teams, but the way they played in those games was really disappointing. And, you know, just look at Leinster on Friday night with all their players away. Scarlets have been dreadful, to be fair, this season, but, you know, very much a second string Leinster team go over there and they win 35-5. That's the standard, and that's where the other Irish provinces are trying to get to close that gap with Leinster, but they're incredibly dominant at the moment, and looks like they're unearthing. You know, Chris Crosgrove playing fullback on Friday night was really good and got a brilliant try as well.
There is a great element to that because we're just saying before the show, like the fact that you necessarily have to play these second string teams on the night obviously is an issue, but it's great going forward for the development of these players as well. Like
it is, yeah. And look, some of the Leinster players will argue we're not second string. You know, Max Deegan, Scott Penny, Rhys Ruddock, but they are on paper because, you know, Van der Fleer, Conan and Doris are your first choice back row, but they're really, really good backup players. You know, Ruddock is an international. Deegan has played for Ireland. Then you've got Jason Jenkins, Ross Maloney. So, you know, the front row is obviously different with Thomas Clark and McKee and Ed Byrne, but that's a very strong forward pack, Johnny, going over to Scarlets, who have been, you know, really, really poor and porous this year. But you know, you look at the back line, Liam Turner, Rob Russell and Chris Cosgrove, those three, they're new players essentially, even though, you know, Rob Russell played a fair bit last season, got plenty of games. But it's the development and it's the experience and it's the confidence to be able to go to that. And it's just a seamless transition when those players come through. They're so well coached. And I think they have been for a long, long time now. And that's the benefit of Stuart Lancaster and what he's done and the other coaches in Leinster. There's a template there that players just seamlessly transition into, and their skill execution is really, really impressive. And I think, look, what they're able to do when all their internationals is away is what makes them so strong, and they've so much depth in that squad.
You know, Rhys Ruddock and Ross Byrne came in for praise from Leo Cullen after that match, and rightly so. And as you said, loads of young talent coming off the bench for Leinster, which doesn't bode well for the other provinces as they try to keep up with what Leinster are doing. Just before we move to Ireland, Quinny, just to touch again on Connacht and that 22-19 win over the Ospreys. So that leaves them 2 points off the top 8. Just looking at the standings, they came away with the 4 match points, and considering they were 12-0 down, a very good result just after 10 minutes as well. So the tries from Alex Wootton, Quillan Blade and John Porch, and then 7 points off the boot from Jack Carty as well. Like, interesting that Andy Friend after the match, not full of praise whatsoever, Quinny. Like he was saying, we lacked the clinical bits that we wanted. There was a lot of fight, but certainly wasn't putting any polish on the performance, and probably leaves something left there for the Connacht players to think about.
Yeah, I think he wasn't. I think Andy Friend is very, very honest in his appraisal without being insulting to his players. And they left a lot of opportunities there. I think they were in the on the 22 6 times in the first 25 minutes, and they came away with nothing, or 20 minutes, I think. They obviously had a poor start, conceding the 2 tries, being 12-0 down away from home. But they were controlled, and they kind of changed gears, and their aggression and work rate and attitude is very, very good. But I think it's just been their execution, I think. And they had Ulster opportunities against Leinster, a couple of weeks ago in dreadful conditions in Galway. And they had a lot of entries into the Leinster 22, and it's very difficult to break Leinster down. They're a very strong defensive side as well. But they just come up with mistakes and errors. And maybe it's a little bit of panic at times and lacking a little bit of power sometimes. But I just think against the Ospreys the other day, they should have actually, even though it's a great win on the road, they should have actually got a bonus point win. They made it difficult for themselves with the start, and then at the end they're kind of hanging on a little bit. There's only 3 points in it, but still getting the results and sometimes not playing well. I think they'll only get better. And but in a similar situation for them, I think they're going to be busting a gut to try and get into the playoff position and get into Europe this year as well. But it's early season, but they've kind of turned things around a little bit. Still got a lot of hard games to go, obviously, and the league is so much more competitive this year. There's no easy games, even when the internationals and the way that the league is positioned now, you don't have games this weekend, obviously, when the internationals are on, so you have opportunities to try and get strong teams out. And I think with the South Africans in it as well, they've obviously made it way more competitive and a better spectacle for everyone.
How would you call Munster Connacht then?
It just depends who's available, Johnny, for Connacht. I think Munster. I think it'll be difficult, really difficult, because, like I said, you'll have a Bundy Aki coming back. You'll have a Connacht team that they've Finlay Beelum away at the moment. Dave Heffernan with the Irish side. Cian Prendergast. Will they start? Will they be playing against Australia the week before? It's unlikely. So they'll probably go straight into the team. So it could very well be a full-strength Connacht side, as opposed to a Munster side who will be down probably, possibly O'Mahony and Tadhg Byrne and Joey Carberry, Conor Murray. You just don't know what kind of teams they'll have. But I think Connacht will be in a better position going into that game and really believe they can go and win there. And obviously, I don't think things are going to get much better on the second row front in the next few weeks for Munster. So you'd have to say, if you were choosing someone to win that game now, you'd probably be saying Connacht are in a better position.
Quinny, all roads lead to Lansdowne Road this Saturday, 5:30, Ireland against South Africa. So the number 1 ranked team in the world against the world champions. I know the South Africans landed in Dublin and they are on Irish soil now. They had a 5-hour delay on their flight from Dubai to Dublin. Of course, there's European-based players as well that made their own way, and I think Cheslin Colby was the last to arrive after playing the top 14. So much riding on this. Is there an element of, I guess, shadowboxing, given that we're in the same World Cup group, or is that just so far away that's not even in the ether just yet?
I don't. Yeah, it's a tough one. That's a really good question. Does it really make a difference who wins this game? And does it give you that edge going into the pool stages of the World Cup next year? Well, I think possibly. I think you'd still prefer to win the game and have that that better position. But in 2017, we beat the Springboks 38-3 in Dublin, and everybody, was lambasting them, and rightly so on the day, I think. And obviously things changed very quickly then for them. Rassie Erasmus, Jack Nienaber left Munster, went back to South Africa and turned things around, and they went and won a World Cup less than 2 years after. So maybe it's a plan again to come and play Ireland here before the World Cup next year. We'll beat them by 30 points again, and they'll go and win the World Cup next year again. I don't know, but look, I don't think that'll be part of Rassie Erasmus, Jack Nienaber's remit to lose to Ireland. They'll want to win here. I think they'll want to go into the World Cup and continue the strength and power that they've shown and the performances that they've shown us in the last couple of years since they won that World Cup. I think they're incredibly powerful. They do the basics so well, and they have some star X factor players who can just come up with pieces of brilliance and win them games. They're pragmatic in their approach, but that works for them. And there's so much physical power. So it's going to be a real test for Ireland, a real physical test. And obviously, the last time Ireland played was in Wellington in July, and off that historic series win. So it'll be interesting to see how Ireland do, and they'll want to get momentum again and build momentum. I think there's a lot said about what happened in 2018, being number one side in the world. After the November series in 2018, getting so many plaudits, Team of the Year, Player of the Year, Coach of the Year, all that kind of stuff, and it unravelled then when it went into the Six Nations in January and February 2019, when England were the first side to kind of break down that Ireland team and find chinks in their armour. I think we want to see, and Andy Farrell has said this about developing players and really kind of develop not just the 23 players, but kind of the development after that. We mentioned Crowley there and Kieran Frawley. Certain other areas you don't want to lose players. I think you want to get more depth and have them all on the same page. So it's a very tough task for Ireland on Saturday, but it's an intriguing one. And you just don't know with South Africa sometimes, and they've shown it a little bit this year. One of their performances in the Rugby Championship was really poor in Australia, and obviously New Zealand beat them as well in Johannesburg as well. But when they're on song, they're incredibly physical and powerful and hard to stop. So it's a great game to look forward to. I'm really intrigued to see how Ireland do, and can they cope with that physical power, and can they match it? We'll wait and see.
And of course, the Box will name their match day 23 today, as usual. They name it nice and early in the week. If you're Rossi Erasmus or Jacques Nienaber Quinny, and hopefully neither are watching this, but what areas of the Irish team are you targeting this Saturday?
I'm not sure they target individuals, but I think that physically and collectively they'll believe that their forward pack can get dominance. So, it's the players they can bring off the bench, and that real power element to their game is hard to stop for anybody, and they can overpower you. So I think their maul is an area where they'll feel that, but they feel this against anyone, that they can attack them and they can go after them. They did that in the summer against Wales. They mauled very effectively against them, and so I think they'll go after Ireland's defensive maul and they'll try and take them on there. That's not going to be a surprise or a shock to Paul O'Connell or to John Fogarty in the forwards coaches for Ireland. Dare I say it, they'll try and be physical with Johnny Sexton. I think if you're playing against Ireland, you get after Sexton and try and put pressure on him. Not give him time on the ball, because he makes things happen for Ireland and for Leinster when he plays. So I think Ireland are a very balanced side at the moment. And when they analyse what Ireland did in New Zealand, the results, it's a results-driven business really at international rugby, I think. But the performances of Ireland that tour, at times when they had the ball, the attack, the cohesion, the balance of where they were able to control things was incredibly impressive. And this is a great test for them, because they're going to get a very aggressive side who are a very physical side, and as part of development and trying getting right for a World Cup next year, it'll be good for them. But
it is good in that sense that, if you say, some people will say that the stuff against New Zealand might have been a shade flattering, or you don't read too much into it. This tells us a lot more, I guess.
It does, yeah, and their collisions and their physicality it's very obvious what's going to happen. But I think it's very unfair to kind of label South Africa just a direct team who kick the ball and who overpower you and win the collisions and they kick penalties and stuff. They have some brilliant talents as well. Lukanu Am I don't think he's not involved, but he's a wonderful centre. Dialende He's incredibly skillful. Colby is back in the mix as well, and they've incredible options out in the back line as well. So when they want to attack and they score brilliant tries, they're very good at it as well. But they play to their strengths a lot, and that's going to be a real test for Ireland. But Ireland are a possession-based side, Johnny, and they hold on to the ball really well. And
it's what
they've
you
got
want.
to get that. Yeah, they've got to get that source of possession line out in scrum as well. So, it's a good test, exactly what you want. November 2017 will tell us don't read too much into it, because it doesn't really matter. What will really matter next year is what happens in that pool stage of the World Cup. But these are really important games for him as well, for both sides.
Look at scrum half, Quinny. It's a bit of a problem area heading into this November series. You got Jemison Gibson Park, but he's not played for Ireland this season. He's been the first choice, of course, over the last year and a half or so. Craig Casey has probably edged it in terms of form ahead of Conor Murray, and Casey's had his own injury problems of late. Are we looking at a case of Gibson Park? Of course, if he's available, he plays. But then is Conor Murray? I mean, is he third string, or is he a squad player? Is he there as a cheerleader and as someone for experience, or what's his place in the team now, do you think?
I think he still has a huge amount to offer. The way Ireland want to play and the way their attack has improved in the last couple of years, Gibson Park has helped that, because he's very quick in what he does. I think he still comes up with an error or two here and there, but he's been brilliant for Ireland. Craig Casey's development has accelerated and he's improved a lot, and that's been in around the squad, being confident in himself, and his ability is very impressive. He does come up maybe some of that decision making at times. He comes up with an error or two himself. I think Conor Murray at this stage still offers a lot. I think he offers you that solidity, that physical presence, really good kicking game as well when needed. And obviously, his delivery, there's nothing wrong with Conor Murray's pass. I just think sometimes it's the speed of getting it away from the base to the breakdown, that half a second. And that's something he can really focus on that. And I'm sure the Irish coaches will have worked on that with him. But I think he still has a lot to offer. Conor Murray is a fantastic player. He has been for a very long time. And it's a case of whether you pick, if Gibson Park starts, do you put Craig Casey on the bench to kind of give you that zip and energy and real kind of enthusiasm? Or do you bring Conor Murray on to see out the game and be like an extra wing forward who makes those tackles, who gets turnovers from breakdown turnovers? I just want to see an edge on Conor Murray, and I think he's an incredible character. He's an incredible leader, and you'd love to see a little bit of a narky edge to him in the next couple of weeks, that he wants to play and that he shows it, and that I'm sure he does. But I'd love to see a big performance or two out of him as well, to really kind of push it back on Craig Casey, who's been chomping at the bit a little bit for him. But it just depends on what the coaches are seeing in training as well. I think some people can jump and say, well, I hate writing players off and ending their careers and saying, well done, thanks for the memories. We saw a dip in Sexton a couple of years ago, and we've seen an incredible resurgence. I think there's a bit of a resurgence in Conor Murray, who's probably suffered from playing in that pragmatic approach with Munster in the last couple of years as well.
Quinny, great stuff as always this morning. Thanks a million.
Cheers, lads. Thanks.
Alan Quinlan there, of course, as he is usually with us.